I sent a
We're
message.
live.
Oh, we're live.
We're live. Excellent.
There we go.
Thanks to those of you joining us tonight. If you want to introduce yourself in the chat box, but the comments field, it'll show up. See who's with us tonight. If you have any questions you think you might want to ask Chris at some point.
Absolutely. It's a good opportunity to ask any questions about what we're doing at the hospital.
Very good. And we'll integrate them as best as possible. And we all know that it's a beautiful evening out there, so we hope our participation is high on another video call for the day.
The good thing is people can join anywhere they are. They could be in their backyard right now and they can join in, right?
That's true. Could be having a cocktail on the back deck. It is a Thursday night, so looking forward to a stretch of warm weather.
Bring us into the weekend. That'd be great.
Feels like the three of us just sort of in these panels, like we're gonna in the first intermission of one of the playoff games. We need to provide commentary on how the first period went.
So maybe if people joining in, if they want to give us live updates in the chat box, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I think the Stanley Cup playoffs are over now that the Leafs are out. So does anything matter anymore? Nice.
Absolutely.
So I'm joining the chat from Woodstock today, where I live. I work for a company in Kitchener, so Chris and I have done a little bit of a flip-flop on our commutes.
Absolutely. I'm joining us from Waterloo, and I work at Woodstock, so me and Patrick can high-five each other on our way to work.
I'm just outside of Woodstock tonight and glad to be here with both Chris and Patrick, who are co-chairs of our Smart Energy Oxford committee.
Great. Well, maybe we'll give it 30 seconds to another minute, and then we'll get into our program.
Sounds good.
All right.
If you're just joining us, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Looks like we've got Ann and Phil with us tonight. Good to see you guys.
Welcome, Phil and Ann.
Thanks for joining while you're having your dinner. All right, well, why don't we get into the program here? So we want to respect everyone's time and have a nice schedule of events, looking to wrap up around 7:30-ish. So welcome for those who have joined. Very excited to have the group we have here today, in particular, Chris Marion of Woodstock Hospital. So just a little bit of background. My name is Patrick. Chris and I are co-chairs of the Smart Energy Oxford committee here in Oxford County. We volunteer on that committee with the goal of pursuing the 100% renewable energy target by 2050 that has been established over the past number of years for the county. So what that means is ultimately is that all of the energy consumed within the county needs to be offset with renewable energy sources within the county. So we have a big initiative to achieve such a goal, and we need to focus on conservation first. So reducing our overall low profile, then flipping to source or energy systems, which can be which have lower energy and lower carbon profile, and then the final step is on-site or local generation, which is renewable. So that's just a very brief overview of what 100% renewable energy target is. And I'll flip it over to Dennis to provide a little background on Future Oxford, which is one step above Smart Energy Oxford.
Well, thanks, Patrick. And for those of you joining us tonight, then, thanks for tuning in. We're certainly excited to be co-hosting tonight's speaker series with the Oxford County Libraries and, of course, the Smart Energy Oxford team. My name is Dennis Guy, and I'm here on behalf of the Future Oxford Partnership, which is a group of champions that believes not only in the vision of an Oxford where communities and economies and environments thrive together, but in the Oxford of today as well, which in many cases already has communities, economies, and environments thriving together. I'm not going to take up too much time from Chris and Patrick this evening, but I want to draw a quick line of sight to connect the dots between tonight's event and what future Oxford is. So about 5-6 years ago, a group of people determined that Oxford could benefit from a county-wide look at community sustainability. Individuals, organizations, businesses, and governments came together to determine, what's most important to maintaining a high quality of life. And they created an inspiring vision for anyone and everyone really to aim for, and that includes achieving 100% renewable energy by 2050. So the result of the community effort is the Future Oxford Community Sustainability Plan that was released in 2015. And it's structured into these 3 pillars: community, economy, and environment. The plan itself documents 70 key actions to build upon the sustainable practices we already have. And, it's nice to say to date, since 2015, 94% of the 70 actions have seen numerous accomplishments. And of course, they continue to see progress today. So throughout the past 5 years, Future Oxford has coordinated and or participated in a number of initiatives, including an in-person version of the speaker series hosted at the various libraries throughout the county. So last fall, we brought the speaker series back to life in a virtual format. And tonight we continue that journey, making a stop to showcase an inspiring made in Oxford success story with the Woodstock General Hospital. So with that, I'll turn it back to Patrick and Chris so we can get going in tonight's conversation.
Very good. Thank you, Dennis. So I just wanted to introduce Chris, a little bit of his bio here, and then we'll get into learning quite a bit about Woodstock Hospital's sustainability initiatives. So Chris is the Director of Capital Projects at Woodstock Hospital. He's worked there for the past 7 years. In his role, he's responsible for operations and maintenance of the facility, which includes facilities management, capital projects, energy and carbon management. Chris has over 10 years of experience in energy conservation in laboratory and hospital settings, including demand control ventilation, recommissioning, as well as installation of major energy reduction and generation projects like combined heat and power, sort of solar photovoltaics, and other key energy and carbon reduction initiatives. As I mentioned, Chris is the co-chair of the Smart Energy Oxford and is also a chair of the Woodstock Hospital's Environmental Advisory Committee. Chris lives in Waterloo with his wife, and we're very happy to have him here today. So
thanks for that introduction, Patrick.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mr. Marion, can you give us a little bit of background about the history of the new hospital and some of the seeds which were planted in the early 2000s?
I like that analogy that you used. So the hospital's journey really does start with the building of our new hospital. When we started to design the hospital, we wanted to make it a LEED certified facility, which, in today that seems like a normal thing. However, when you turn the clock back to 2000, we didn't have the Canadian Green Building Council developed here. So LEED wasn't officially a program in Canada. And it's something that our CEO really pushed for. And with the support of our board of directors, was able to convince our design partners to do so. I think they thought we were a little bit crazy, but I think that they were really ahead of their times in understanding the importance of connecting the hospital to a more sustainable design. So when we went through the process, we became the first LEED Silver hospital in all of Ontario. I think one of the interesting things with the hospital being built to a LEED building is it really also provided us an opportunity. So we moved from the old hospital to this new state-of-the-art hospital that had a lot of these nice environmental features. But anyone that was maybe stuck in their old ways, you were forced for change. So I think it really created a corporate culture that embraced change. I think that was a really important seed that was planted because that allowed us to develop future programs. Once you start embracing change and can look at other opportunities, I think it really allows an organization to see other possibilities. And that's how we started to develop our other environmental initiatives since we moved in.
Very good. Thank you for that great background, Chris. And I know LEED is a very complex process to work through, and it involves many aspects of building design, from the operational side of things to the construction of the building, to where the materials are sourced for the building, and really provides a holistic view on energy efficiency for the hospital.
Absolutely.
So I'm sure that it's a very complex process to work through, especially when it was at its infancy in Canada.
No, absolutely. And I think we got a lot of our LEED credits from the concrete we used in the facility being post-consumer recycled material, which gave us a lot of credits. And again, there was a lot of initiatives we did in the design. I think one of the interesting things was the landscaping. I don't know if you noticed, we have an eco-lawn turf. So it's just a fescue blend, which what makes it different than other grass is the roots are a lot deeper. So it allows it to get nutrients and water lower below the surface, which makes it drought tolerant. So we don't have to water the grass, as well as our wildflower meadows, which include native indigenous plant species, which I think the landscape architect did a really good job in incorporating in our design. It's important to use local plants, I think.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. So just to follow up to that, so the hospital has been operational for a number of years now, and certainly the foundations were clearly established, and the building was set up for success by working through the LEED process. Since the building has been in operation, I understand you had 3 principles that you've worked through as foundation for conservation and other initiatives. Can you talk through that a little bit, Chris?
Sure. Yeah. I think one of the things once we moved into the building, regardless, you could have a great energy designed building. However, it doesn't make you immune to increased utility costs. So we started noticing from when we moved in until about 2014, 2015, we saw a really big increase in our utility costs here at the hospital. And one of the things is any money that we're spending towards our utilities is money we're taking away from our primary focus, which is obviously patient care. So we created a 3-part plan, which was first was conservation, to try to reduce the amount of energy we're using in the building. The second was to generate our own power on site. And the third was feed and tariff, where we could sell the energy back to the grid.
Very good. Thanks, Chris. So we had a question come in the chat here from Brian Smith about LEED. And I think you just touched on how there's a lot of ability to impact facilities and adhere to strong standards, whether it's a new construction or a renovation of an existing facility. From your experience in the new construction side of things, and certainly with the respective renovation projects, given a majority of our hospitals across Ontario are existing facilities, what are some of the principles that apply regardless if it's a new construction or renovation?
So I think with any building, whether it's a new building or an old building, there are always opportunities. I would say the older the building, the more the opportunity. And I think there's a lot of retrofits and people understanding that retrofits can have a positive impact, not just on your utilities, but also on future capital costs. And I think Patrick would be very, very well versed in the fact that maybe you spend a little bit of money on insulating your building, but it could decrease your capital costs on your boilers or your chillers when you go to replace them by decreasing your heating or cooling loads. So I think there's actually a lot of opportunities for older buildings with a lot of good payback and as well as decreasing their environmental footprint.
Exactly. And sometimes it's just getting headspace into buildings. So there's a lot, certainly in the healthcare setting, there's a lot of complicated systems. And sometimes they can be left to operate as they are, and the user groups within the buildings change. So there's a process called recommissioning where you look at the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems and look to ensure that they're operating as per the original design or as per kind of the new arrangements. And often there's huge energy losses because of something as simple as scheduling of spaces or lack of controls and sequences on those spaces as well.
And that's something we actually undertook at our hospital, was redeveloping all the sequence of operations, recommissioning the hospital. And we had a lot of success doing so. I know when we did it, we looked at our boilers, our chillers, our air handling units. Actually, one of the more interesting things that we did is we looked at how we were dehumidifying. So a lot of hospitals and clinical spaces, we have very strict requirements on humidity, such as operating rooms. And to do so, what typically is done, you just lower the discharge air temperature. So it comes out at 12 degrees, which is quite cold, and you would feel cold, but that's what's required to basically drop the humidity out of the air. When it hits the cooling coil, you got to change it from a gas to a liquid to condense that. So you actually have to heat the air back up to go into the space. So believe it or not only are you spending money on electricity for dehumidification, but then you're spending money on natural gas to heat it back up. So one of the things we developed in our sequences, which I thought was quite innovative, was dehumidifying on demand. So we could sense what our humidity rates were, and then we would set our supply air temperature accordingly. So this saved us on electricity, but we also saved us significantly on our natural gas. And again, when we did their sequence, it was a really good process where we could understand the building better. And there was a lot of things that we were able to tweak through schedules, like Patrick mentioned, to increase our usage here in the building.
That's great. So it sounds like there's huge cost benefit, and the time is the headspace to really.
Well, I think the good thing too, you're using what you have. So I think in any kind of building, it should be your first step is conservation. I don't think the solution is just to throw up as much renewable energy as you can to offset it. You got to look at how you're using the power first. I think that's absolutely the first step in any program.
Makes sense. Absolutely. So moving down the line, and you mentioned renewable energy, we've seen posts, and we've seen some of the infrastructure from a solar photovoltaic approach that you've implemented at the hospital. And I understand that you've integrated some unique approaches, both on where the solar PV is mounted, but also how you can support behavior and educational programs.
No, absolutely. So we installed, for people maybe not familiar with the project, we installed 135 kilowatts of solar power at our medical building, which is approximately half of the building's energy needs. And one of the things when we started looking at it, me and our CEO, we went over to Lens Mill here in town in Woodstock, and they have a roof-mounted solar voltaic array, and we wanted to see what it looks like. When we went there, we couldn't actually see it from the street, so we had to kind of walk up this hill, and we could finally see the panels and the racking. And our CEO kind of said, well, it'd be great if you could actually see it and engage with the public. And that kind of sparked the idea of, well, what if we made it part of the architecture of the building? And that's what led us to doing our fascia-mounted solar. We actually were expecting those panels not to produce as much electricity, and we were okay with that because we thought it gauges the public. It looks good with the building. We thought it was a kind of a good way of showing that solar can be fun. But ironically, in the winter, when we get a blanket of snow on the roof, those panels are always producing power. So it's actually exceeding our expectation in terms of generation. So not only does it look good, but it produces good power too. And then you mentioned before we want to interact with the public. So that's kind of step one, was the putting it into the facade. And then step two is we created educational signs located in the beginning of the building, as well as a TV with a dashboard. And this just shows how much power we're producing at any time. So I think people are always curious, if it's a sunny day, how much power are you producing? If it's maybe more of a shady day, and people can see it in real time and engage with it. So we thought that would be a good idea just to inform the public of what we're doing.
Very good. Thanks, Chris. Another question here is, as we're along the lines of on-site generation, and a screenshot has just been shown here of the medical building with the roof-mounted solar photovoltaic, which Chris was referring to, and I think the fascia-mounted is on the hospital itself, up on the south side there. There you go. There's a really good visual that we can hold up there. So I understand there's another source of generation at the hospital, called combined heat and power. Can you explain what combined heat and power is and the benefits of it, Chris?
Absolutely. So combined heat and power, also known as cogeneration or cogen for short, uh, it's basically a reciprocating engine that burns natural gas to produce electricity as well as heat for the building. So think of it kind of like a car, but instead of turning tires, you're turning a big alternator that produces electricity. And just like a car, the engine produces heat. If you were to touch that tailpipe, you'd probably burn your hand. But we want to take that heat and use it. So we capture it and we bring it back to the building, and we provides heating for us all year long. So the idea with a cogen is you have a very efficient means of burning gas. So you're producing both electricity and natural gas. I think it's really a transitional technology too. It can lead into other technologies as they become available in the future, maybe such as hydrogen, and who knows what can come up. We're very innovative. And it also adds a bit of resilience for us at the hospital. Being able to produce our own power on site gives us a little bit more control if something were to happen to the grid.
Very good, Chris. It sounds like a co-beneficial approach, particularly in the healthcare setting.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we can produce about 85% of the hospital's power from that cogen.
Amazing. That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Chris. Let's flip the discussion to the waste and waste management. I think everyone understands, and if they've had an experience at the hospital with the requirements for sterilization and feeding and everything, that there can be a lot of waste produced at the hospital. What are some of the initiatives that you've integrated from a waste management perspective?
So we're really big on trying to divert as much waste from the landfill as possible. One of the things that we did to really start down that path of waste diversion is we did a base audit to get a baseline data. So what that is, we had people basically go through our garbage for a whole week, and they told us the percentages of what is our garbage made of. And what that did was actually created a story for us and showed us where our biggest areas of improvement were. So that was back in 2014, and about 25% of our waste was organic waste. So we were able to put a program in place for organics and really hit that on. And we were able to really reduce our waste over the past 5 years. So we're currently around 43.5% diversion from 28, so a 15% increase. And we got a goal of 50% diversion by 2025. And I'd also like to say that our frontline staff are an excellent resource for information on where to improve. They're there, they understand what we're doing. One of our good examples is in the ORs. Our staff noted that we had these polypropylene wraps that we put around the OR instruments for sterilization to make sure they're all clean. And we just were throwing that in the garbage. There was no way of recycling it, unfortunately. And they said, hey, what about like a linen alternative? So we were able to implement that, and that current program is diverting 5 tons of plastic from the landfill a year. So I think with these great ideas, there's a lot of opportunities. And just speaking of opportunities, not to go too long, but I really do like waste diversion. Just recently, we were approached. There's a Norwich Plastics right here in Woodstock that does PVC recycling. And why this one's so interesting to me, it really speaks to the innovation, which to me is really encouraging and good to see. PVC, we have a lot of PVC like oxygen tubes, oxygen masks, and they're single-use items that just go in the garbage. And we never even thought that you could recycle it because it wasn't an option. And they have a process of being able to recycle contaminated PVC. And that's a program we're looking to implement very soon. So, even items that we didn't even think we could recycle, with innovation, we're turning out we can recycle it now. So it makes me very hopeful that those numbers will be able to go up and up and up as time goes on.
That's great, Chris. And it really looks like there's momentum, not only that you're driving, but that also the industry is driving through companies like that. And it's being reflected by the behavior of your staff as well as kind of advocates for waste diversion.
Absolutely.
That's great. We understand that you've recently implemented a new parking lot at the hospital and around the medical building. And I don't think too many people get too excited about sustainability when it comes to parking lots. They just see asphalt and that's about it. But I think there's some features that you've integrated which could be of interest and something which some people would not think about when they think of parking lots. Can you share a little bit on that topic, Chris?
No, absolutely. So we had to build a parking lot. Our hospital's expanding. We need to obviously provide parking for our staff and visitors. So when we went to the drawing table, we said, what can we do with this? Like you said, it's a black tarmac. It doesn't seem like there's many options. So we started peeling back the layers, and we worked with our landscape architect. We worked with our engineers with ideas, and they came up with some pretty innovative things that we could do, and I'm pretty happy with the outcome. So one of the things was the seating that we did for the adjacent hillside. We went with a prairie mix, which is a mixture of grass and flowers, which is really good for encouraging pollinators as well as just wildlife and birds for the area. And started learning more about using native indigenous plant species that are to the area. So when we did our tree selection, using things like red maples or white oaks, service berries, and incorporating that into the landscape design. The other, I think the feature that I got the most excited about was a rain garden. And I wasn't aware of this before the project. So typically in a parking lot, you just kind of, all your storm water just goes to your storm drains and your city takes care of it in your stormwater management. But when you think about it, before the parking lot was there, when it rained, the ground just absorbed it naturally, right? So that's the idea of a rain garden. Basically, we funnel the water into the center of the parking lot where we have a grass kind of area, and it's built up with rocks and a bunch of silt screening that allows the water to absorb into the ground naturally and locally rather than being pushed off to the city to deal with. So I thought that was a really good creative design choice to kind of incorporate some environmental features into the parking lot, and it looks great.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. And that hits on a question which came through from Brian Smith around water savings associated with landscaping. So with your native species and collection of water from the hard surfaces and filtering it through those mechanisms, you're not irrigating on a constant basis when you have a series of hot, dry days, which decreases your water load. And then the other question Brian had was on cooling effects. So there's something called heat island effect, Brian. So the kind of your hard surfaces have a negative impact on the heat dissipated around the general surface. So as much as the space which can integrate green spaces or absorb solar energy through photovoltaics or green roofs or otherwise, the better for the environment. So
I also wanted to mention too, not only are you saving obviously on irrigation, Brian, but one of the interesting things, if you don't water your grass as often, you're not creating a warm, moist environment, which larvae likes. So actually it decreases pests and insects that obviously we're not using pesticides, but by not watering, we also don't have as many pests because it's not a good environment for larvae. They kind of want that warm and damp locations. When you have a dry location, it's not as favorable.
Very good. Thanks, Chris. So 2 more questions here. We're approaching 7:30. So we'd like to, I have one question on electric vehicle charging and then a question on the future. So what you see as the next steps for the hospital as we all collectively track towards energy and carbon goals within our society. So back to the first question on electric vehicle charging. You've implemented a significant amount of infrastructure for EV charging. Where do you see the projections on EV charging, and how and what's the value in integrating that in your hospital setting?
Well, I think that in terms of future projections, right now on this call, we have 100% between you and myself. So
that's correct.
I think it definitely has a future. It makes a lot of sense in terms of as you know, decreased maintenance costs, decreased costs of life in terms of electricity versus gas. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And even since when we first installed our electric car chargers at the hospital, every year we see more and more users using them. That's actually why when we installed them, we installed additional capacity to double it in the future. And just for the viewers, so we have level 2 chargers at the hospital. And what a level 2 charger means, just like your oven at home, it uses 220. So just like your oven, it has a very similar amount of power draw versus a level 1, which would be like a plug that maybe your computer's plugged into right now. And that's a level 1. So that's kind of the difference between the two. Level 2, you can charge a little faster. So yeah, no, I think we're going to see more and more adoption. And how we did that project, we're ready for, increased demands in the future if need be.
Very good. I'll look forward to parking my Ford F-150 Lightning there in a few years for a charge.
Absolutely. First charge is on me.
All right, deal. And just to that point, to charge a vehicle compared to fill it up with a tank of gas is a massive difference in price towards the benefit of the electric side. So last question here as we wrap up, Chris, is what you see. What do you see in the future for the hospital as you move forward with next steps?
Well, I think we really hope to meet or hopefully even exceed our waste diversion from the landfill goal of 50% by 2025. And I think we really hope to see more solar at the hospital eventually. And again, I think conservation is something that you don't just do once. I think more and more technology is coming out. I think that's something that we're constantly going to be doing. LED retrofits. There's so much possibility. I think we're looking at doing some re-insulating some walls right now. The possibilities are really endless. As you know in your industry, Patrick, there's always something new coming up, and there's always another way to improve.
Absolutely. Very good. Thanks, Chris.
I just wanted to say one other thing. I think one of the big things that has led us to where we are is we're very fortunate for our frontline staff being very passionate and willing to take on these challenges that we give them. Our success, we wouldn't have it without their buy-in. And then the other one is obviously our leadership from our senior management team being supportive of these projects is absolute paramount, as well as our board support. Without that kind of foundation, I don't think we would be where we are right now.
Right. So it really comes from all levels of the organization, that level of commitment.
Absolutely.
Very good. Thank you, Chris. Dennis, if you want to pop back into the window for your close, I think
we have one question here from Christopher Kennedy. If you want to take it.
Yeah. So what do you think the most easily transferable innovations you've made in the hospital setting, which apply to commercial or residential use?
Well, I would think that our solar panels would be very easily transferable. And I think with the recent government grants too, a little more affordable as well for residential with the $5,000 are now offering towards residential solar. I think that's really easily transferable. And in terms of commissioning, you could almost look at upgrading your thermostat to like an Ecobee and having some of those a little bit more efficient settings, like when you're away running down your system. So I think that could be, it's basically the same thing. You're redoing your sequence of operation at home. So that would be another real easy way to implement something at your home.
Yeah, the other thing I would mention from the home standpoint is, if you're at the point where your furnace is at end of life, there's technologies that you can implement which both are a typical natural gas-fired furnace, but you can also replace your typical evaporator condensing unit with a heat pump so that you can use electricity to heat in the winter at a very energy efficient rate, but still provide the flexibility of natural gas. So,
and by heat pump, Patrick, you don't mean a ground source heat pump, you mean an air source. So you don't have tubes in the ground. It's just, you wouldn't even be able to tell the difference between that and an air conditioner, right?
It looks exactly the same as your current furnace air conditioning, other than the outside fan looks a little bit different. That's it.
Absolutely.
Very good. Dennis, we'll flip it over to you.
All right. Well, I guess I'm the only thing now keeping us from the rest of the evening, so I will be brief. On behalf of the Future Oxford Partnership, kudos to the Woodstock General Hospital for investing in a journey and listening to Chris. It's community, it's economic, and it's environmental sustainability all together. So thank you for advancing Future Oxford. I also want to thank those who helped make tonight a reality. Donna, Thomasina, and Sarah helped behind the scenes. Certainly Patrick for emceeing tonight. And of course, Chris, thanks for taking the time to share the hospital's journey to sustainability with us. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you.